Hello, friend. Myself, Sanjeev Divedi, and on behalf of Vidyalankar Institute of Technology, I welcome you all in this Java session. In this session, we're going to talk about exception handling in Java. Now, exception handling is a very important concept that is implemented in Java, which was not there earlier. Now, what do you mean by exception? Before that, we should try to understand problems. What are problems? Exception is a type of problem. Now, when it comes to problem in Java, we can have problems of two types. One, the problem that arises in my program at compile time. When I'm compiling my program, compiler will give me certain errors. We call them as errors. So the problem that arises in my program at compile time, we call them as error. Now, errors are normally syntactical error. Just have a look. See, errors are classified like compile time and runtime. All syntax error will be detected and displayed by Java compiler, and therefore these are known as compile time error because my compiler is able to understand them and identify them at compile time. For example, like missing semicolon, missing double quote, using undeclared variable, or you are referring to an object which you're not supposed to refer to. Now, these are some compile time problem which my compiler understands. It notifies me. Now, the point with compile time error is we need to correct these errors. If we are not correcting these errors, then my program will not compile and eventually will not execute. So the basic idea is to correct these error, compile the program again. Once the compilation is successful, then you can go for execution. So this is about compile time error. Now there is something called as runtime error. Runtime means the compiler will not be able to identify them because these problems arises in my program at runtime based on certain input or certain requirement which are made available at runtime only. Compiler will never able to identify these problem at compile time. Now, for example, see, sometimes a program may compile successfully creating the class file but may not run. When I say class file, I mean dot class file. Such program may produce wrong result due to some wrong logic or may terminate due to some errors like stack overflow. Now, normally what happens is whenever we have a runtime problem, now for example, I'm writing a program where I'm reading value of A from user. I'm reading value of A from user. A is integer dot parse int. It's a buffered reader. I'm using buffered reader. You may directly use scanner object br dot readline. I'm purposely using buffered reader because it is capable of throwing IO exception. And suppose I've read the value of B from user. Now suppose if C is A by B. Now what type of problem? Now here what happens is I'm reading a string, I'm converting into integer and assigning it to A. Now suppose user asks me to enter a number and I entered hello. Now hello is a string. It cannot be converted into integer, correct? So not numeric string which converted into integer and assigned to it. So here there is a chance of number format exception. Number format exception. Now suppose the value of A is 10, perfect, no problem, no number format exception happens. Value of B is 0, no number format exception happens because 0 is an integer. But here there will be a problem. Denominator will be 0, so that will give rise to arithmetic exception. Now, what is the point? See, the user will not enter the correct format value. This cannot be anticipated by my compiler. So my compiler will not give such error. Denominator will be 0. Again, my compiler will never able to anticipate this, that denominator will be 0. So these are the problem that arises in my program at runtime. These are known as exceptions. Now, what happens is generally when an exception occurs, if it is not handled. Now, what do you mean by not handled? We'll talk in detail. If the exception is not handled, it results into abnormal termination of my program. So what happens is if these types of problem arises in my program, it causes my program to terminate abnormally. So what is it? It's like something that suppose you are registering yourself to Election Commission of India website as a voter and you entered your age as 17. I mean, you're not allowed to register. Then it won't shut down the website. Correct? It will simply give you a notification. You are not eligible. Your age is less than 18. Now, what do you mean by that? Because see, it is kind of handling methodology implemented. It's like if user enters a value which is less than 18, then we are supposed to give them notification because it is a wrong input. Now, if you enter, suppose you have in a form an email ID field where you're supposed to enter your email ID, and if you're not in, I mean, if you're missing at the rate sign or at the rate symbol, then again it will not shut down the form and say that we will not allow you to register. It will simply give you a notification that it is not in a correct format. So what you do is you correct it. So what is the basic idea of exception handling is, if at all exception is generated at runtime, we should provide corrective measures to ensure that the exceptions are handled. We should provide corrective measures to ensure that the exceptions are handled in rational manner, and it should not lead to abnormal termination of the program. This is what the idea is. Now, runtime error, like denominator is 0, you're trying to access an element. Okay, you're trying to access an element which is out of bound. Your array size is 10. Your array size is 10 and you're trying to access 11th element or 20th element. Then you're trying to store a value in an array which is uncompatible type. Like in an array of integer, you're trying to store string. In an array of integer, you're trying to store float, and so on. Passing parameter that is not a valid range. Suppose I have a function that takes 2 integer, correct, and I'm taking the input from user at runtime, and I'm passing the value in function call, and if it is not in correct range, the value does not fit in correct size range, then it will generate runtime error. Attempting to use negative array size, yes, if you're trying to ever if you're attempting to create an array of negative size, again it will generate runtime error. I mean, converting invalid string to a number, I mean, and you are trying to access a character which is out of bound of the string. So if your string is hello 0 1 2 3 HELLO5 0 1 2 3 4, so the range will be 0 to 4, and if you're trying to access fifth element or sixth element, then it will give you character out of bound in a string. So these are some common runtime errors that we encounter during our program execution, depending upon the input that we provide. So what is exception handling? Exception is an event which occurs when the execution of program, I mean, during the execution of program generate error. Exception handling helps us to terminate the program at runtime because of logical error. Helps us not to terminate. See, help us not to terminate the program at runtime because of logical error, but allows the program to take some corrective action and execute it further. This is what exception handling is. Now, when it comes to handling the exception, there are 5 keywords that plays very important role. Let us try to understand them with example. Now suppose we have a class ex. In class we have public static void main string array. And now suppose I'm using buffered reader, correct? So first we have 3 integers a, b, c. I'm using buffered reader. Buffered reader br equals to new buffered reader, new input stream reader system.in. You must be aware of this. And for this, I need to import java.io.asterisk. Now, if I ask user SOP, enter value of a and b sub. Now I want to read value of a. It's like integer dot parse int br dot readline. Similarly, we have b as integer dot parse int br dot readline, and we're writing c is equal to a by b, and then we have some display. Result is plus c, and then I'm saying SOP hello, and this is end of my main, this is end of my class. Now what it tries to say is this. See, if you understand, here we can have IO exception, here we can have IO exception, and number format exception. Why IO exception? Because I'm reading the value from read line. There may be a problem in my IO stream. So it is capable of generating IO exception. And suppose if I entered hello, hello cannot be converted into integer and assigned to A. So this is again number format exception. So here we can have IO exception and number format exception. IO exception and number format exception. Now suppose if the value of A and B are proper, they are integer, but value B is 0. So there won't be any number format exception, but here there will be arithmetic exception. There will be arithmetic exception. Now the point is, if any of this happens, suppose A is 10, B is 0. So at C is equal to A by 0, my program will abnormally terminate. We will not get result and we will not get displayed as hello. Now suppose if user entered hello, hello cannot be converted into integer. So my program will terminate from here point. This will not happen, this will not happen, this will not happen, this will not happen. None of the statement further executes. So what happened is there was a problem in my program, and it is which was not handled. There was exception in the program which was not handled. So it resulted into abnormal termination of the program. It resulted into abnormal termination of the program. Now we want to stop this. What we want is, we want that if at all there is some problem in my program, I should be in a position to specify corrective measures to be taken. I should be in a position to specify action to be taken to handle the exception. Now to implement this, we are provided with certain keyword like we discussed, try. Now what is try block? Try to understand. What will happen is, try to understand the code that is capable of generating exception from here to here. These are dangerous code. Dangerous code in the sense, I say, ki, there are chance. These are a piece of code where we need to monitor for occurrence of exception. So the thing is, you will put this into try block. So what is try block? Try block contains code that we need to be monitored for occurrence of exception, because if the exception occurs in try block, then there is a chance of it being handled. If the exception occurs outside the try block, then it cannot be handled and program will abnormally terminate. Now what happens with try block? After try block, we need to provide some corrective measures. So what we will do is, after try block, we will provide catch block. Catch, here I'm writing IO exception E, and I'm saying SOP IO error, just SA. And then I'm saying catch number format exception, it is capable of generating. And let's say wrong format. And last we had arithmetic exception. Now why so many different catch? See, it's like we would like to handle each exception differently. So we can provide different catch for it. SOP denominator is 0. After this catch, now have a look of main. Now try main and then class. Okay, now let's see. Now here, suppose there is IO exception. Suppose IO exception occurs. So remember this. These IO exception, number format exception, arithmetic exception, these are classes. They are built-in classes in java.lang package. So each type of exceptions are represented using a class. Now what happens if a particular exception occurs, like suppose here IO exception occurs here at this point of time in readline, then object of IO exception is created and thrown from the try block from that point. So from this point, IO exception object is thrown. So B, C, and SOP are bypassed. Control comes here. It is reference of IO exception. So can it refer to IO exception object? Yes, the match is found. Output will be IO error. So if a catch block is executed, it means that we have handled our exception successfully. All other catch will be bypassed and output will be hello. So if IO exception occurs here at this point of time, control directly goes to first catch. Will it be able to handle? Yes. All other catch are bypassed. Directly output will be hello. Now suppose there is no IO exception and I entered input as hello. Now hello cannot be converted into integer and assigned to a. Again, at this point of time, there is number format exception. Now from here, object of number format exception is created and thrown. First catch, can it refer to number format exception object? No. Can it refer to number format exception object? No, because it is IO exception reference. Can this catch refers to number format exception? Yes. Output will be wrong format, means we have handled the exception, and control goes to SOP hello. Now suppose value of A is 10, B is 0. So there won't be any IO exception, there won't be any number format exception. But at this point of time, there will be arithmetic exception. So the object of arithmetic exception class is created and thrown. Now first catch will catch. Will it be able to match? No, because we have object of arithmetic exception. This is reference of IO exception. Next catch can be matched? No, because it is reference of number format exception. Last catch can be matched? Yes, because the object is arithmetic exception and this reference is of arithmetic exception. So the output is denominator 0 and hello. And hello. So what will happen is we have generated the exception and we have handled the exception. So program execution continues. Now suppose if we got an exception which is other than these two, these three. So if there is an exception which is other than these three, then my program will abnormally terminate because we do not have catch for it. Now, how to solve this problem? So to overcome this, a good programming practice is that at the end, last catch, we can directly write exception class, exception E, and let me give a statement, SOP general error, SAE. And then we have SOP hello. Now, what will happen if we have exception which is other than 3, then exception class will be able to handle. Why so? Because E is a reference of exception class and all other classes like number format, arithmetic, IO exception, they all are subclass of class exception. So exception reference can refer to object of all of these classes. So ideally speaking, alone exception. So ideally speaking, alone exception class catch can able to handle all the exception. But then now, but then will it be good enough to just provide single exception? So I answer is no, because we cannot have single handler for all the exception. My program will not give any error, but just try to understand here. If my output is wrong format, at least it gives me message. Ki bhai, the input was wrong format. If there is IO error message, then okay, fine. There was an IO exception. Now we cannot have ideally a single handler to handle all these exceptions. But this is in general the basic structure of exception handling. We will have a try block that will contain code which is capable of generating exception. Ideally, we must have minimum one catch exception so that it can handle all the other exception, but then there will be a single handler for all the exception. We can provide multiple catches each to handle specific type of exception. Remember, exception generated in try block will only be tried to be handled. If exception is generated outside the try block, then it won't be handled and program will abnormally terminate. So this is about basic skeleton of try catch block. For further details, you can study complete reference. In next video, we will provide you in detail about try catch, finally throws also. So looking forward for the next video. Thank you very much.